Welcome to Parenting Successful Teens, the podcast that cuts through the overwhelm and stress of this phase and offers parents simple, practical, cognitive, science-based strategies for keeping their teens on track. Join Master Coach and real-life mom, Allie Irwin, to talk about real teens, real problems, and the skills it takes to raise successful adults.
Hey, Happy New Year, everybody. I am really excited about this week's podcast because what I want to do is let you take advantage of a whole bunch of conversations I had with clients over the holiday season. I saw this pattern in my clients of where the concern that they came to their sessions with about their child, they were actually like almost exactly mirroring in their own behavior. So the big idea for today is the idea that your child is a mirror and anything that bothers you in them is also bothering you in yourself. And this idea in and of itself is not a new idea, right? Like that's a pretty common thought that whatever you're saying about another person, whenever you're complaining about someone else, like you actually have that in you as well. That's what makes you notice it in another person. But I think our kids are uniquely poised to be mirrors for us because we're just with them so much. So many other relationships that bother us in our lives, like if we have a coworker that bothers us or a neighbor or like some other mom at school, we can kind of limit our interaction with that other person. We can manage our irritation with them, thus avoid that issue in ourselves. Whereas when it comes to our kids, because we're their parent, we feel uniquely tasked to correct that issue in them, which gives us a unique opportunity to correct it in ourselves as well. This is really counter to the way most people approach issues with their kids, right? Most of the time when we see an issue with our kids, our first instinct is to try to get them to stop doing the thing that we see as a problem. Right? Let me give you a specific example. If you're someone who is sensitive to judgment, you are going to try to manage your kid's behavior so that you won't be judged as a mother. Okay? You'll worry about people judging your children, not really because what they're doing is so terrible, but because you yourself are worried about being judged as a bad mom. And this idea that we put that on our kids doesn't make us bad moms. It just makes us human. But becoming aware of the idea that whatever we're seeing in our kids, that our kids are bringing out our insecurities in ourselves, it's good to recognize it because the normal reaction is to try to manage our kids' behavior. Like if we think that thing that they're doing, we think our child like dyeing their hair blue is the reason we're worried about being judged, then we try to control their behavior in order to avoid that judgment. Okay, when we believe that their behavior is causing our insecure feelings, and that insecurity can be anything. It can be annoyance or fear of judgment or difficulty with boundaries or worrying about friendships. Like it can be anything, but I'm just using the broad term insecurities. When we believe their behavior is causing our insecurity, then we're tempted to manage their behavior instead of managing our own insecurity. A lot of the issues that parents have with getting respect from their children really comes from a place of parents not giving themselves the respect, not respecting their opinions opinions, and then asking other people to make them feel respected. Or we're trying to control other people's behavior, which you really can't do. Especially, through the teen years, you have very limited ability to control another person. And we're trying to do that instead of controlling the person that we absolutely do have control over, which is ourselves. So I want to give you a quick, really specific example because this is sort of a big idea and I want to bring it down to a really practical level. So over the holidays, I took my daughter over to visit a couple of my aunts. And I love these women so much. I love all of them. I love my aunts. I love my daughter. And I've known these aunts my whole life. But we haven't lived here that long, or we're back where I grew up. So my daughter doesn't really know them that well. She's only seen them a couple of times, but I love everyone and I want them to love each other. And while we were there, everyone was catching up and my aunt asked my daughter, who'd been pretty quiet since we arrived, about her fall internship. And she answered them in about 4 sentences, which is honestly a pretty typical response for a 19-year-old with people that she only sees a couple of times a year. I want to be clear, there was nothing wrong with her answer. But in me, it triggered this weird insecurity because I just want everyone to know each other and get along and love each other the way I love them. That isn't in and of itself a bad thought, but because it's an insecure thought, instead of managing my own thinking in that moment, I tried to manage the situation instead and jumped in and started telling my aunts about all the cool things my daughter did over the summer. And it came from this place of me wanting them to know each other. But here's the thing, and here's why this doesn't work, is because I jumped in and started talking more. They all already know me. So instead of giving the situation the space it needed and trusting that the only way they would get to know each other is if I left the situation alone, if I left my aunt alone to ask questions and my daughter alone to answer them, I tried to jump in and manage the situation when what I should have been doing was managing my own thoughts about how much I wanted everyone to have a great time. Looking at this situation, I had the thought that my daughter wasn't saying enough. Instead of managing my own mind, instead of controlling my own thoughts and my own reaction, I jumped in and said too much. I tried to manage the situation instead of managing my mind. So what I want to offer you is, as things come up with your kids, look for where the thought you're having about them is existing in yourself. And then before you jump in and try to change their behavior, first see where you need to look at your own insecurity around that behavior. Because if I had done that in this conversation, I would have known that the way to get what I wanted, my aunts and my daughter to know each other, was to keep my mouth shut. So I hope that's helpful. I hope you had an amazing holiday, and I will talk to you next week.